As far as I remember, there's always been this divide between God of War players and Devil May Cry players, whose game is better and whatnot. Most people can simply like what they like and let it be, and most people probably just like both series to some degree, or at least respect the one they don't. However, as a fan of both, but someone who vastly prefers God of War, I hear from a lot of DMC players that look down on God of War. They don't even see the games as worthy of being mentioned in the same conversation, particularly due to mechanical depth and stylistic expression. I'm hoping this can be a video that God of War fans can send to their DMC-loving friends that simply can't comprehend why they like God of War better. I'll do my best here. Now, I would never go as far to say God of War is close to being as deep as some DMC games can be, but they're also not shallow, especially God of War 3 with the multi-weapon combos you can do. Seriously, just look at God of War 3 combo videos and you'll see that game has a lot of room for creative expression and combo juggles. It's great. And we'll get into the gameplay aspect soon, but that's all anyone talks about when they compare these two series. I wanted to come here and talk about why I and others personally prefer even the weakest God of War titles over the DMC series, even if DMC does have more depth in its combat. And no, we're not talking about the new God of War. First, a comparison. It's similar to how I prefer Mortal Kombat over Street Fighter, or really any other fighting game. Not only do I just vibe with the controls and the physics of Mortal Kombat, I also really like the violence. I always have. I love the gushing blood and breaking bones. I also like MK characters a lot, and I have a long history with them since I was a child. You could never ask me to care about Ken or Chun-Li or Juri. I'm not saying they aren't great characters, I'm just not attracted to the world. I'm happy to admit that Street Fighter is a better made fighting game in many aspects, but there's more to games than just their gameplay. If you judge games solely on their gameplay, you miss the larger picture. For another quick comparison, it's like saying Resident Evil is better than Silent Hill because it has better designed resource management and inventory management. Yeah, that may be true, but you also have to consider the puzzles, the story, the music, the sound design, the difference in location, the creature design. If you boil games down to just one thing, you're missing so much, and you make it hard to understand why someone could like something so much more than you do. And God of War is so much more than a combo system. Like Mortal Kombat, the over-the-top, at times horrific violence is part of its appeal. I want to rip off the heads of Gorgons. I want to burn this guy alive as part of a puzzle section. I want to be drenched in the blood of a Cyclops' spewing eye socket. I want to rip out the guts of a centaur. I want to gouge out the eyes of a god and throw him off a mountain, flooding the entire world. For as much as I'm amused by cool Dante using a motorcycle as a weapon, it just doesn't compare to Kratos jamming a giant sword through the heart of a god that made him kill his family. On a narrative level, Kratos is compelling to me. His brutal and savage look does it for me way more than the gorgeous, wisecracking Dante in his slick jacket. Dante's humor is charming, sure, but I'm just not pulled into the character like I am with Kratos. I love the tragic backstory of Kratos' family, and the fact that while we sympathize with Kratos' cause, we also know that he's a terrible person. The game does a great job at getting me to care about his story even though he's awful, which is something I find really interesting and complex. And the Greek setting is simply far more entertaining to me than wherever we're going in DMC. And there's a war between Earth and the demon realm. I find the drama of the Greek gods more entertaining to me personally. I'm not saying DMC's world and story are bad, they could be brilliant for all I know. It just doesn't resonate with me enough to care about it. I greatly prefer Kratos' redemption journey and his quest for revenge against the gods. I'm far more excited by confrontations with the Hydra, Perseus, the Kraken, Hades, Ares, and I'm not just more interested in them generally, but I love God of War's interpretations of them. There are a lot of boss fights in both series, a lot of great boss fights, but I think there's a real difference in how they're introduced. DMC's boss fights are occasionally related to Dante's personal journey, but many of them feel disconnected to him, and boss fights are usually better when there's something to truly care about. Kratos' fight with Ares is not just mechanically great, but thematically great, as it involves a section where you have to defend your family from doppelgangers of yourself trying to kill them. Kratos is essentially fighting against his own guilt of killing his family, hugging his family in this fight to give his own HP bar to them. One of the most brilliant emotional fight mechanics I've ever seen. I do appreciate many boss battles in the DMC series, I just don't feel them the way I feel the fights Kratos goes through. Slaughtering the gods that defend Zeus from his vengeance, fighting the barbarian king that slaughtered Kratos' Spartan army, leading to him selling his soul to Ares. I didn't talk about Virgil in my DMC 3 video because I thought it would be funny. And it was funny, but I'll say here that the fights were fantastic. Learning his behaviors, maximizing damage, I don't have a lot to say. I'm not going to break down the fight attack by attack. I'll just say that he was a smart and rewarding fight that tests the skills you've built until then. One of my favorite boss fights, maybe ever. But while I certainly give the technical victory to Virgil, I give the emotional victory to Ares, the Sisters of Fate, and of course Zeus. They are well-designed fights in their own right, maybe not as brilliant as Virgil, but I connect way more to the narrative, and that puts them over the top for me. And in God of War, if the fights aren't personal, you'll at least get strong moments of setup to establish the stakes and give you a good idea of who you're fighting and why. The level-long build-up to the Hydra is epic. Same with the Colossus, as it takes the entire level to take him down and you face him multiple times. Perseus, on top of already being well known from Greek mythology, shares a common goal with you, making his role as competition and an enemy instantly clear. And on top of that, he's voiced by the actor who played him in the original movie Clash of the Titans. I find boss fights in God of War to be easier to connect with, but I'm sure some of that also has to do with my preference for God of War's narrative. Of course, there's also the art style, the camera direction, and the music. I know people love DMC's music, they seem kinda crazy about it, but I just don't get it, I'm sorry. The whole electro, metal, drum and bass, groove rock thing with goth vocals, it isn't really for me. It kinda sounds like, forgive me for being harsh, it kinda sounds like Diet Combi Christ. It gives me flashbacks to hanging out at the goth club while my more physically talented friends had fun on the dance floor while I chugged tequila shots in the corner thinking about how I'm gonna talk to that cute girl with the fake neon dreadlocks. Man, that's a look I miss. I'm being reductive, but you know what I mean. It's a sound, it's not gonna be for everyone. I definitely prefer DMC music that doesn't have vocals, but God of War's soundtrack is so freaking epic. And yeah, putting the quality discussion aside, the music in these games is so different you can't even compare them. The big booming orchestras playing these epic bloodlust-inspiring anthems with chanting choirs, I'm totally into it. I love the bold presence of horns and the banging percussion. And this is why, in some ways, comparing these series and judging someone for liking one over the other, or saying God of War is just a DMC knockoff, is unfair. They're in the same genre, just like Ninja Gaiden and Bayonetta and Hi-Fi Rush are, and we should want diversity of choice in a genre, but it's not like God of War is copying everything DMC did. It's entirely distinct in its character, tone, narrative, level design, music, and art style. Both series look great. DMC 3 was highly praised in its day for its top-notch cutscene work, and if you're into the way these games look, there's a lot to appreciate. But there's something about God of War's art direction that simply blows me away. The scope of the world, the places you travel to. I think we all remember the first time we went to the island with the horse statues on it, running down the chains and realizing how massive this place was. God of War has you fighting in the foreground while a giant Colossus statue is in the back rampaging through the city. In the same year that Devil May Cry 3 came out, God of War delivered one of the most breathtaking moments we'd ever seen up to that point. The camera revealing a giant Ares fighting the armies of Athens in real time as you entered the city. Sure, it looks technically primitive now, but in 2005 on PS2, this was something special. The pits of Tartarus, Pandora's Temple, the Desert of Lost Souls, the ships leading up to the Hydra fight, the labyrinth boxes, and of course all the gorgeous character designs. The camera work is also something I commonly talk about in God of War, and in some ways it shares a lot of qualities with other DMC titles. These are not JRPGs where the camera tends to be centered behind your character as you fight. DMC started as a game built on an old version of Resident Evil 4, and hence used the famous survival horror series fixed camera angles to frame the action, to various degrees of success. While it beautifully frames the world, in combat you can end up with enemies off-screen. Not so much of a problem when the enemies are slow-moving zombies, larger problem when you're fighting fast demonic beasts, in groups. DMC titles have a way of dealing with this, and that's to corner an enemy and keep the rest off-screen, because their AI is programmed to not attack as long as you can't see them. And yeah, that's a fine tactic, but I find it a tedious way to play. Awkward angles point upwards, leading to reduced visibility. You have enemies so huge they take up 50% of the screen. The camera starts freaking out when you get close to a wall, and so on. Then DMC 5 has you in complete control of the camera perspective with the right analog stick, which is a whole other can of worms. Long story short, I personally hate being in charge of the camera, because it means I have to dedicate one of my two thumbs to constant camera management, instead of using it for attacking and jumping and whatever else. I would rather just have the camera nicely frame the fight with all the available information in view, and not have to worry about the camera at all. Because attacking? That's fun. Jumping? That's fun. Dodging? That's fun. Stopping what I'm doing so I can turn the camera just to see? That's not fun. God of War, on the other hand, just pulls the camera back. It gives you a full view of the battlefield and allows for fast reactions to anyone attacking you. It's very rare that you end up cursing the camera during combat in a God of War game. Not saying it doesn't happen, no camera system is perfect, but for the most part, God of War's camera gives you excellent visibility while also beautifully framing the environment, so you can also appreciate where you are. The excellent camera system allows for breathtaking cinematic moments, like when the camera zooms out during the Kronos fight, to make you see how small you are in comparison. Once DMC 4 comes along, it seems they've figured out the camera better. It's not so zoomed in most of the time. I don't see it freaking out as much as it does in DMC 3. In DMC 3, they started experimenting with allowing the player to rotate the camera, and by the time you get to DMC 5, the entire game is built on that, which has the unfortunate side effect of losing the beautiful cinematic camera moments outside of combat, like this moment here in DMC 4. It's nice that as the games go on, the camera is more pulled back and you can see more though. But now that we've mentioned combat, let's talk about that for a moment. It's undebatable that DMC overall has more combat depth, and I like DMC combat a lot. I love the challenge presented in DMC 1 and 3, I love the creative expression and stylish options found in the series, but there are specific things I like more about the combat in God of War. God of War is the first game I ever played that had hit stop. That's when the animations freeze for a split second when you make contact with an enemy, and it just adds that extra oomph to every hit. It really feels like you're hitting them. Rolling is just one input and it always rolls. In DMC 3, if I try to roll but the camera is off or I'm obscured, I might end up backflipping instead. I'm supposed to use jump for the iframes, but sometimes I just want to get out of the way, you know? I love that in God of War, with a quick flick of the right stick, I just roll in whatever direction I pressed. It's wonderful. God of War has puzzle-style combat moments, most notably in the first game where you have to use Medusa's gaze to freeze a Minotaur on a switch, which then opens a gate and you have to get there before the Minotaur unfreezes and steps off the switch, therefore teaching you the usefulness of this new magic attack. You have to push a prisoner up a ramp while enemies are trying to kill you. The Hydra boss fight requires you to jump on platforms and impale the smaller Hydras so they don't attack you as you climb up to fight the main Hydra head. God of War 3 has a part where you have to kill all the enemies before they reach a wall that turns them into larger enemies, and another one that's timer-based and you have to catch on to the harpies to stay off the spiked floor. God of War 2 has a part where you have to carry a man across a bridge while defending him from enemies. I'm not saying that DMC never has these moments. Hell, I'm having flashbacks to the chess piece boss battle where the pawns will morph into larger pieces if they reach the end. And the doppelganger boss fight has a great puzzle element requiring you to shut off the lights in order to damage him. I'm just saying that I'm a huge fan of this puzzle-style combat design, and God of War games feature a lot more of it. I also prefer the special input controls far more in God of War, because they aren't dependent on directional inputs in a 3D game. Every special attack is performed by holding block and pressing one of the 4 face buttons. There's no way you could ever possibly get the wrong attack. In DMC, your special attacks are done by holding the lock-on button and pressing forward or backward, plus the attack button or the style button, whatever does it. And since your character might not be facing the exact right way, it's easy for your special attack to simply not come out. Or you get a different attack instead, because there's so much chaos on screen that you didn't realize you were facing the wrong way, and now you've done an air launcher instead of the forward charging stinger attack. It's annoying. This is definitely way better in DMC 5. I get much fewer wrong inputs compared to the old DMC titles, though I still get the wrong thing from time to time because of locking onto the wrong enemy. I also really like the brutal kill animations in God of War. You can call them dated and you can crap on QTEs, sure, but I love these things. Wearing down an enemy and then doing this violent murder, I love it. I'm so into the world and the attitude of Kratos that I feel satisfaction from performing these takedowns. And I love that there's something you can actually fail. I have to pay attention to the buttons I press. I have to mash hard or the animation won't complete. And your reward for killing them in this violent fashion isn't just the brutality. You also get a resource bonus. Most enemies will give you a red orb bonus. Some enemies like the Gorgons or Sirens will give you a magic bonus. Killing a Minotaur this way will give you more health. God of War ties the fun brutal animations to a fast minigame that you actually have to pay attention to and then rewards you with a much needed resource on top. That's smart design, one that the new God of War games have largely forgotten about, because the XP system is now randomized instead of being tied to player performance. And the next 2 points are possibly the most important on the list of gameplay observations. First is feedback during combos. So both God of War and DMC give you red orbs to upgrade your weapons and abilities and/or unlock new moves. In DMC, you naturally get red orbs in combat as enemies die, but you can increase the number of orbs they drop by reaching a high ranking in your style meter, which goes up as you do more damage, keep your defense up, and experiment with a variety of attacks, resulting in the flashy, stylish gameplay the series is known for. The only thing I wish were different is the visual information communicated to the player. Your orb total at the top goes up as you're getting these orbs, but it can be hard to keep track of just how much you're gaining. What I love about God of War's combo system is that the extra orbs are calculated using combo milestones. In addition to enemies simply dropping red orbs when they die, if you reach 10 hits in a combo, you get 2 extra orbs. The game tells you plus 2 orbs. If you reach 20 hits in that combo, it's plus 4 orbs, which is added onto the first 2, meaning you actually gained 6 at this point. This exponential orb gain is a really cool motivating factor for keeping a combo going, having good defense so it isn't interrupted, and using these long animation, uninterruptible, multi-hitting special attacks that rack up a bunch of tiny hits on a group of enemies, or maybe a single enemy that you're focused on in the air, all at the risk of being hit during the animation because, like I said, they're uninterruptible once you activate them. So there's this cool risk-reward to using them. You can get these huge combos and see that really satisfying plus 25 or plus 50 or plus 100 orbs on the screen, and you know you just got a huge bonus for your performance. I would love this kind of real-time feedback in a Devil May Cry game. Maybe it exists in one of them, I haven't played the full series yet. The last point I'll bring up is the checkpoint system. So DMC has had different checkpoint systems throughout its history. The first game had continues that you had to buy or find, using them upon death to respawn in the previous room. If you run out, you have to restart the whole level. The devastating feeling of having to completely restart was a good way of instilling fear in the player, so they used their red orbs for health potions to stay alive, devil trigger potions for a sudden burst of power, and buying extra continues to save their progress. It made for a really interesting decision-making process, where you either bought resources to stay alive, or you spent your orbs on weapon upgrades and new attacks to be stronger. Devil May Cry 3 preserves this system, calling it Yellow Mode, but then also introduced a second option, Gold Mode, which has infinite continues. If you die, you respawn in the previous room with full health. No penalty, outside of the end-of-level ranking system if you care about that. No deduction of resources or anything like that. And my only issue with this is the recharging health. If you go into a room with 20% health and you die in that room, you respawn in the previous room with full health. I am not a fan of this system because it completely defeats the purpose of having good defense. When you win a fight taking little damage, that should feel good because you're taking that health into the next fight. You've preserved a valuable resource. That feeling is taken away from you if you can just lose a bunch of health, go into the next fight, die, and respawn at 100% HP. Compare this to classic God of War games, where if you go into a fight at 20% health and you die, you respawn with that health. You deal with the health you have when you enter a fight. It creates tension. It forces the use of valuable magic resources that maybe you wanted to hold on to. It might push you into a safer playstyle. It might push you into a more intense and focused playstyle so you can eliminate a dangerous threat faster. It changes your enemy prioritization because maybe someone can give you a healing orb. It creates much more interesting situations. There is a way around it. Every time you die, the game gives you a tiny sliver of health back. This is so players don't get absolutely stuck on a section and give up. If you keep dying over and over, your health bar will be gradually filling back up, giving you a fighting chance. You could view it as an exploit, and that would be fair. I view it as an opportunity. You have the opportunity to take on the fight as the true challenge it's meant to be as you entered it with low health. But if you just can't get past it, the game is going to give you what you need after you die 20 times. And that's about it. That's my explanation. I hope I helped you understand why someone might be way more into God of War than Devil May Cry. It's not all about the gameplay. It's obviously very important to have good gameplay, and I think both series have it, but gameplay only takes you so far. If you're not into the other parts like art style, music, story, characters, pacing, level design, it can be hard to fall in love with an action game no matter how well designed the action aspect of it is. Thanks so much for watching. This was a really fun video to put together. If you want to support this channel, you can join my Patreon or become a YouTube channel member or buy something from my store. I'll see you soon, and yeah, bye.